Hi, this is Marjorie Saulson of Vibrant Vocal Power. And today I just realized that I left a big hole in my course, Always Know What to Say. I have this whole module you see about difficult situations. In business, how do you handle a question when you don't know the answer, and how do you handle it so you don't blow your authority and expert status? In personal life, how do you handle a question from your nosy Aunt Tilly or Uncle Tom and not answered without causing a family feud? But today, my husband and children and I have to attend the funeral of the niece of one of my husband's cousins. And I just realized that I never touched on perhaps one of the most difficult things to do, and that's to communicate to somebody who has just suffered a loss. And in the Jewish tradition, which I follow, one of the most important commandments, the word in English usually is pronounced as mitzvah, which actually means commandment, even though it's often translated as a good deed, because many of the commandments are good deeds. But one of the most important of those is to comfort the mourner. And probably it's one of the most difficult. What do you say to someone who's just had a loss? And so I'd like to divide that into kind of two pieces. First of all, very often in the Jewish tradition, at least, instead of sending flowers or something like that, we make a donation in the memory of the deceased. So I'm sharing out of my own experience what was consoling to me. When my dad passed away, I was only 26, and my mother was the principal mourner, so she got most of the cards of condolence and the announcements of donations and so forth. But when my mother passed away 18 years later, not only did I feel like an orphan because both my parents were gone and now I was the oldest generation, but I got all of these notes saying that a donation had been made in the memory of Florence Schumann to this organization. And my first reaction was, I know my mother's name. I really know my mother's name. And after a while, I know all these things were met with such care, but it felt very impersonal, except for one donation I got. And that was from a friend of mine and sister who made a donation in memory of my beloved mother. She didn't need to use my mother's name. And she wrote me a personal note saying that she had lost her own dear parents and she knew this was a very difficult time for me. And from that time on, every time I have had a friend who has had a loss, if it's a Jewish friend, I send a note with indicating that a donation was made in the memory of your beloved husband, your beloved wife, your beloved mother, father, whatever, and a personal note. And if I knew the person personally, I shared something about my admiration for that person. I thought he was a very fine person, a gentleman of the old school was one of my favorites. And if there was somebody who had a particular influence on my life, I like to share that, because a lot of people who lose somebody, they have no clue about the outside lives of their parents or siblings or whoever's passed away. And the interesting thing about it is I ran into a friend of mine just a couple weeks ago, and she told me she was still saving the note I had sent her upon the passing of her husband. Now, her husband has to have been gone at least 10 years, and she still saved that note. And I get notes of thank you back. Thank you so much for sharing that memory with me. I never knew that about my father or whatever. It means a tremendous amount to people if you can write a personal note. Now, for my non-Jewish friends, I buy some very beautiful condolence cards, and I write a note there as well, even though it's not part of a donation generally. And that's written condolences. And what do you do when there's a house of mourning, as there is in Jewish tradition, and you feel obligated to go there, or you want to go to the funeral home where there's a viewing for non-Jewish people who do that? And sometimes you avoid doing it, and then you feel guilty afterward because you didn't have the guts to share with that person. So what do? Well, one of the things you can do is go up to that person and without a word, give that person a hug. A hug says, I care. I feel for you. It's important to do. And I've done it many times and had people hug me in return. You can tell how much it means to me because I'm starting to cry right now even as I think about it. The other thing is to share stories. I lead prayer services for houses of Shiva, of mourning in the Jewish tradition. And between the two services in the evening, there's a pause, and I invite people to share stories about the person who has passed on. And one of the things I share is sometimes humorous stories are the most consoling to people who've had a loss. And when you can share stories about your experience with the person who's passed on, it means a great deal to the person with whom you're sharing it. And it shows that you cared about that person as well as the person with whom you're sharing the story. So hugs and stories to me are the most powerful way to console people who've had a loss. And I really hope that you find these suggestions to be worthwhile, because when we avoid people because we're not sure what to say, we cheat ourselves and we cheat them. People who've had a loss, and particularly in this day and age, there's such horrific losses from overdoses and from suicides. I mean, there's an epidemic in this country of that. And when friends and family avoid those who've had this horrific loss because they don't know what to say, you don't need to say anything. You just need to be there sometimes. Or a short note saying, I care about you, and let's go out to lunch sometime when the first horrible stress of grieving is past. Let people know you care. That's the most important message you can give to anyone who's had a loss. Again, this is Marjorie Saulson, of Vibrant Vocal Power. And I wanted to share with you this part of important communication. Always know what to say. And that's my story for today. And I hope you find it consoling, helpful, whatever. And I am going to be, by the way, adding a new video to my module. My module on difficult situations is a compilation of several short videos. I'm going to be adding one in on this topic as well, because it all comes to us in this life where we have friends and family who lose someone dear. And we need to know how to handle ourselves in a way that is consoling to that person and keeps the relationship strong. Because when you avoid it and you feel guilty ever afterwards, it dilutes or distracts or can even ruin the strength of a relationship. Why did nobody call? Why does nobody care? People who are suffering from a loss, they should not lose their relationships with friends and family because of that horrific loss, whatever it may be. So I hope you found this helpful. Marjorie Saulson, Vibrant Vocal Power. Find the power of your compassion to share with those who've had a loss. Thank you.